Hello, everyone. Thanks again for gifting me your time and listening to another podcast episode of The Impulsive Thinker. Today, I have the founder of CADDAC, which is the Center of ADHD Awareness Canada, Heidi Bernhardt. I think it'd be best, Heidi, if you introduce CADDAC and the history of it, and you are the founder, and if you could also share why you founded it, I think it'd be very powerful for everyone to hear about that.
Sure. So many years ago, when my oldest son was 14 and a half, he was, he was diagnosed with ADHD after 3.5 years of seeing multiple professionals and getting misdiagnosis and blamed his parents for what was going on. I started looking around for support for parents, found a local support group and actually worked with them for years building the ADRN, but realized after a while that there was no national organization for ADHD. Nobody was doing sort of Canadian awareness of ADHD. There was no real education work done. I mean, the 1-hour presentation by a physician here or there kind of thing, and there was absolutely no advocacy being done. So in 2004, we formed CADDAC, myself and a few other parents, and then in 2006 we nationally incorporated as a not-for-profit, and it grew quite quickly. I mean, at the time I was the executive director for CADDAC, who's our sister organization of the leading medical professionals in ADHD, and built CADDAC in my volunteer life, and then in 2012 left CADDAC to focus solely on CADDAC. So basically our focus has always been to better the lives of those with ADHD. And I will admit, at the beginning, we focused more on children and parents, because at that time, what people don't realize is adult ADHD was really just coming out, right? Research was just coming out, books were started, were being written, there were webinars for medical professionals, but before then there wasn't a whole lot of talk and focus on adult ADHD, but it's grown phenomenally since then. And of course, CADDAC now supports, educates, advocates for ADHD through the entire lifespan. So we have a phenomenal amount of resources on the website, webinars, educational sessions, conferences. We write policy papers. We advocate to government. We help individuals advocate. So again, so many resources, so many different ways we are trying to help individuals with ADHD, but also entire families who are dealing with ADHD, have more support, learn more about ADHD, and advocate for them.
So like you were saying at the beginning, the focus was on kids with ADHD. And at the time, adult ADHD was almost unheard of. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the belief was it was only a child condition and adults grew out of it with time.
Yeah, we used to think that adolescents grew out of ADHD because their hyperactivity decreased. And of course, we know that is the hyperactivity and impulsivity part is what generally is the red flag that, right, brings teachers and parents' attention to those with ADHD, right? So physicians and medical professionals in the field used to think, well, we can see that outward hyperactivity decreasing. But when you talk to adults with ADHD, as you will know, what they talk about is that hyperactivity remaining internal, right?
Yeah.
The mind racing is still there, right? It just, the outward symptoms change a bit. And actually, now that we're doing more research, over the years, we're becoming more aware that those are also the reasons we're missing a certain population with ADHD, right? So anyone who has the primarily inattentive presentation, be they male or female, more often female, but not exclusively, also tends to get missed. And this year we just published a paper, and our focus for Awareness Month was girls and women with ADHD, because we know we're still hugely underdiagnosing and undertreating. And
Can you explain more the difference between inattentive and the hyperactivity?
Sure.
And then maybe go a little more about why girls and women are all overlooked also, and
Sure.
why they're being diagnosed later in life?
Yeah, so there's 3 presentations of ADHD. It's all called ADHD now, but not everyone has the H, or the hyperactivity and the impulsivity. Those who do not have the inattentive or primarily inattentive presentation, where that is their main sort of presentation. They generally always also deal with issues with executive functioning and emotional dysregulation as well, but they're not those sort of little boys who are bouncing off the wall in the classroom, right? The ones who are disruptive, who get everybody's attention.
They're more visible and more disruptive,
Exactly,
right?
exactly. And they're the ones who are annoying, right? You know,
yeah.
the quiet child at the back of the class who's daydreaming, you know, not getting their work done, that kind of thing, doesn't draw people's attention. Mind you, their ADHD is just as impairing to them, right, as those with the hyperactivity and impulsivity.
And they're judged more as being lazy and not focusing and not trying.
Or often not very bright, right?
Oh, yes, good point.
Which, yeah, which could be the total opposite, right?
Right.
These kids could be actually brilliant. And just to mention, those are also the kids we don't diagnose are the bright ones, right?
Right.
All 3 of my kids are gifted. So they weren't failing at school, and they were actually keeping their hyperactivity, their emotional dysregulation, impulsivity, all of that stuff for at home, because they could keep it under taps at school. I think they were intuitive enough to know there'd be big consequences, right, at school.
And they were able to achieve and set and achieve goals, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to a certain point, obviously, yeah, you know, they did that procrastination of doing, you know, their schoolwork at the last minute and stuff. But they all still graduated, you know, with high school with, you know, marks in the high 80s, low 90s, you know, type thing, without putting in too much effort. Mind you, they all went to university and crashed.
Yeah, well, and that's the other part too that I've been learning a lot lately is about the adult giftedness. Was brought to my attention when my oldest daughter went to the gifted program. She's ADHD. If it wasn't for the gifted program and that environment, she'd be in a lot of trouble right now. But even the gifted side has its own complications.
Yes,
also, let's add ADHD in there. And then, like for me, I got Asperger's also in the autism scale. So it's quite interesting how they all melt together, and it's just being neurodiverse in the neurotypical world is quite interesting when everyone the measuring stick doesn't make sense to you. And I think with having that said, like that's why I think I perceive like the high achieving entrepreneurs, they're all intelligent, they're smart achievers. They've been overlooked too because they've always done well and you're successful. And like my GP still tells me, I don't believe it. I respect the psychiatrist who diagnosed you, so I'm not going to challenge it, but I still don't believe it because you're too successful. Right? And I think to go back to the women and girls, I remember in school that the girls were always the smarter ones, the ones that already did better in school. So would that be also another overlook of girls and women?
Yeah, so interestingly, not necessarily the smarter ones, but the ones who conformed better, right? The ones who actually got their schoolwork done better and handed in the pretty project. So what we know with girls is that, yes, they also tend to have the primarily inattentive presentation more, but when they have the hyperactivity, it's more subtle. So it's things like shaking their leg, twirling their hair, being chatty. They're not getting up and running around. Now, again, we're generalizing. There are girls that get up and run around the classroom, right?
Yep.
But more often not. But also, the girls are very, very concerned about fitting in with their classmates, of looking competent at school. So they put in a lot of effort. A lot of parents will talk about their daughters can't have ADHD. They do okay at school, but when you dig down, they're doing 3 and 4 hours of homework every night in elementary school to accomplish that, right? And they also think that that's possibly why they end up with significant internalizing disorders like anxiety and depression and eating disorder, and as they get older. So we also find that as well as just totally missing the diagnosis, we're also misdiagnosing with anxiety, depression, eating disorder, substance use. And not that they don't also have these disorders with ADHD sometimes. So sometimes we just misdiagnose as anxiety and depression because the intent of and those symptoms can look the same as ADHD. But even when they do have coexisting anxiety and depression, we miss the underlying ADHD, and then we spin our wheels trying to treat these women, and we're generally unsuccessful because we're only treating part of the disorder. When we find we treat the ADHD first, very often the anxiety and depression reduces on its own.
Okay, I originally had a different tangent, original plan for this interview, but I want to keep on this one. Like, I think this is very important. We stick on women and ADHD and what you just said, in the what they call comorbidities. It's very true. And what I've been learning, I've talked to quite a few other entrepreneurs about it. They were all diagnosed with depression, anxiety. And after many, many years of trying to treat that, it was going nowhere.
Yep.
So would that be an early sign that maybe something else is going on? And maybe if the ADHD was treated first, that the others could be lessened or disappear?
Definitely. So in our policy paper, this is one of the things we point out and we ask for. So we ask that medical professionals get more trained on ADHD in general, but also ADHD in women, but also the subtle differences in the presentation, that everybody with ADHD looks different. It's a very different disorder, right? So we're asking that those that are assessed for anxiety and depression are being treated, as well as substance abuse, eating disorders, chronic pain, insomnia, all of these things that we know come with ADHD, that they also be screened for ADHD. So every family doctor that is treating somebody for anxiety and depression, and that's the majority of people are being treated by their family doctor for this, also be screened for ADHD, right? It doesn't take long to do a simple screener, but again, also be aware that some of these screeners focus in the rating scales very much on the hyperactivity and impulsivity. So they need to dig a little bit more, and I remember one woman being assessed and diagnosed, and her psychologist said, how many times have you lost your cell phone? How many times are bills late, and being paid? Are you late for appointments? All of these kind of questions, and she said, oh my God, I thought everybody lost their debit card 3 times a year, right? She just thought that was the natural way of things, right? And until somebody actually focused on this and asked these questions. So we need more focus on ADHD by mental health clinics, by educators, right? By psychologists, social workers, everybody working in the field, for us to be able to catch those people that we're missing or misdiagnosing, because there's untold suffering going on that doesn't need to be going on, right?
Right.
We know
Yeah.
ADHD is the most treatable mental health disorder, right?
Yes.
We know, mind you, it's not always simple, right? Because
Yeah.
we want to treat it with multimodal, treatments. And I mean, that's a whole other story about the lack of access to, anything other than a physician and a prescription. But still, we know that we can do a much better job at catching people, assessing and treating them with ADHD with much better outcomes.
Right. So multimodal may include medication, environment change, therapy, awareness, education is key for one, and
Yeah.
then changing habits and routines. Like I've experienced over my experience, undiagnosed and diagnosed. So anxiety, depression, some of the other mental health disorders and ADHD have similar or can have similar symptoms. Is this correct in saying that if you treat the anxiety and the depression and it works, those symptoms will disappear or lessen? But with ADHD, it's almost like a chronic condition where it's constantly there no matter what you do.
Yeah. Well, and for some people, the anxiety and depression can be chronic as well, right? Because if it's
True.
not situational, right? But for a lot of people, it can be treated, but we have to be careful, because sometimes people with ADHD also just have coexisting anxiety and depression. So treatment will make it somewhat better, especially in the short term, but it will not totally get rid of it or treat it to the level it can be treated if we don't have a clear picture of all of the disorders.
Right.
When I do my parent training, I talk to them about trying to understand their child's entire profile, right? So they need to know, yes, is it hyperactivity? Is it impulsivity? How are their executive functioning? How is that impacted? What about the emotional regulation? But also, do they have learning disabilities? Are they on the autism scale? Or a lot of kids with ADHD and adults with ADHD, they may not reach full criteria for autism, but they certainly have some of the symptoms, right? Or impairments. And we also know now with research, all of these neurodevelopmental disorders overlap significantly in their impairment.
Oh, wow.
So I'm less, interested in, of course, unless you want to use it for advocacy, which we have to, the diagnosis, but figure out the profile as an adult. That's what I say to adults. Learn about ADHD generally, but then learn about how it impacts you personally, because that will lead you to the best type of treatment, strategies, accommodations, supports, if you understand your impairments.
Right. Yeah. And I think I've always said ADHD is only a part of you. It's not all of you. And so by understanding how you work best, your strengths, your weaknesses, even your personality to a certain extent, and how you deal with situations. And I, like with me and my engineering team, everyone's got those, we work those and we understand the whole person so that we can understand how they work and how we can communicate in their terms rather than in my terms. So that's a valid point. So what's the importance of continuing and pursuing adult ADHD awareness?
Yeah, well,
we're gaining a lot of momentum, but do we
Yeah.
still need to pursue this?
Well, because we still know we're significantly underdiagnosing ADHD in general, but specifically adult ADHD, right? So the number of people who are being diagnosed in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, right, who were missed as children, And again, with huge consequences, unemployment and relationship breakups and bankruptcy and, all of these bad things. I mean, we now know it hugely impacts physical health, right?
Yes.
Phenomenal paper by Russ Barkley. People who are trying to lose weight and stop smoking and exercise and aren't being successful, right?
Yeah, been there.
Because the underlying
Yeah.
ADHD is not being diagnosed. If you're impulsive and you're inattentive, how are you going to follow a diet and exercise program?
Yeah, and spiking emotional dysregulation, mood swings. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So, I mean, we know when we don't treat ADHD, we have huge socioeconomic consequences and costs as a society, yet we're still ignoring a lot of people with ADHD. We have to get a lot better at this.
Yeah, because what I think a lot of people do not realize is the untreated ADHD just destroys and kills your self-confidence and your self-acceptance, right? This term self-acceptance just came to me like a few months ago, and I realized after 40 some years, I've never accepted myself. I've always been the oddball, and I started to believe whatever people told you. So even if you're successful, you may still not like yourself and don't feel that you're successful. And then it's a tough one to explain to people who don't understand.
Yeah, and you know what? That was a major theme when we were talking to women with ADHD.
Yeah.
And I think that was something research also showed, was that women were harder on themselves. Women with ADHD, they took it very, very personal. They weren't a good mother. They weren't a good wife. They weren't a good daughter. And really, yes, the same journey that you said you took, these women talked about taking years and years to accept themselves and the way they were, their strengths and their weaknesses. But it took years to get to that point, right?
Yeah.
Chipping away at the self-esteem, and it took years to build it up again.
And I never realized this, but now that you said it, makes complete sense how girls, they're more concerned, or not, not more concerned, but they are concerned about fitting in and conforming at a young age. That's a great insight for me as a father of two girls, so I got to pay attention to that. But I can see how that amplifies or affects the self-confidence bit. If you can't fit in, if you can never conform, it must be you failing, not the fact that my brain's different, I just work differently. So I appreciate that insight, because I did not know that. What is the future of CADDAC?
Well, you know what? I think there's no bounds, there's no limit at this point. I mean, really, we're producing more programs, and I think ultimately moving to a charity in spring of 2020, has worked out well. Obviously, we've still got to, work at that. And, bringing more awareness, building CADDAC could also help with, building, our fundraising efforts, because let's face it, ADHD affects a significant part of the population, right? It's funny that people think that CADDAC is funded by the government, right? That we get all this money from the government. Doesn't actually happen that way, right? But it's surprising, the number of parents I talk to on help and who are so thankful, and they're like, oh, can I, send you a bottle of wine or this gift basket? I'm like, no, just support CADDAC, right? That's all we need, because to be able to offer more programs, do more advocacy, build our, ADHD awareness work across the country, and also, reach more remote areas. I mean, those are the parents who really have nothing, right? No support. We need the support of families and individuals with ADHD, or even just those who are interested in those with ADHD, right? So really, I think we can continue to grow and offer more and more over the years with that support.
Yeah, like I've been involved, where are we now, 2021, almost 2 years now as a director on the board. And I can tell you one thing, it's amazing what you do not see when you attend the workshops or the conferences, is the amount of work that your team puts in and the passion that they have developing and putting on these events. Like especially like lately, you guys been having a big push on more Facebook Live or more free seminars and more organized, structured programs like parenting programs and coaching sessions at a reasonable, affordable rate for people because of the donations you have been receiving. It's a passionate team. It's just amazing how much work they put in, and I'm glad to see that we're again seeing some results out of that. But I gotta say too, Heidi, is thank you very much for starting this a long time ago. Starting a nonprofit is no different than starting a for-profit company. A startup's a startup. You still have a lot of the same typical, and you got to sell yourself and push it, and you never gave up on it. And for me, going to that first conference in 2019, right after my diagnosis, it was amazing where right when I walked into the room, it was the first time I felt normal. I felt I didn't have to justify anything. I just was comfortable to be in there and talking to other similar ADHD people. That we don't have to explain anything, right? Yeah. It was fantastic. Exactly. To find me, like we do have a community, we do have a network out there with similar people. And I highly recommend to the listeners to check out CADDAC website at caddac.ca. I do know that a lot of the world and a lot of medical professionals refer people to the CADDAC website. The resources are unbelievable. And you can see what they've been doing. They're on LinkedIn, they're on Facebook. They're actively on social media. Please check them out and follow. And also, you can also donate to CADDAC at caddac.ca/donate. $5 will go a long way. It's just amazing what has been done, especially we got that resource navigator that now can help, a dedicated person that can help people direct them to resources in their parts of the world or Canada even. But yeah, thanks again, Heidi. And I appreciate your time on this. And I really appreciate that we went along the lines of bringing more focus and awareness and knowledge about women and girls with ADHD and the reason that they're remiss. I think that's definitely a conversation that need to be discussed. Because I know a lot of listeners out there, they may not be diagnosed, but they've been reading a lot about it lately. And I hope this can help them get some of those puzzle pieces together. Wow. This was a great conversation. I appreciate your time, Heidi. Any last notes?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would just encourage people to, find out as much as they can about ADHD. Go to the CADDAC website. We've got YouTube videos, we've got webinars, we've got all kinds of things, because we know, those with ADHD aren't keen on reading a lot of text, but hey, we've got that too on the website, right? So, we try to reach people everywhere we can. I mean, hopefully we'll eventually start having a live conference and live webinars again, because as you say, that energy in the room at a conference or a workshop where you see, parents huddled in the corner, talking to each other, supporting adults with ADHD, saying, oh my God, and really, they build support groups and networks from meeting each other. So hopefully we'll be able to do that. But again, who knows with COVID. But listen, our last conference, we had over 500 attendees.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Amazing.
So we'll just keep plugging away on it.
Keep motoring on. And
exactly.
Perfect. Thank you, Heidi, for your time and your expertise. And for creating CADDAC. And to you, the listener, if you don't mind, please make a donation to CADDAC at caddac.ca/donate. It'd be greatly appreciated. I'll provide a link in the show notes. and also provide links to CADDAC's website, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Thank you, Heidi.
Okay, my
And
pleasure.
talk to you
Andre.
again. Thank
Yeah.
you, everyone.
Okay.
We'll talk to you soon. Take care.